Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 20 and in this edition we're adding a third chapter to our profile series with a look at the few but meaty appearances of one Sherry Birkin. My name is Syniac, you can just call me Cy, and joining me on the panel this week, batting 20 for 20 on the First Aid Spray podcast and an equal amount of success streaming knife-only runs of the Resident Evil 2 remake, it's Firebutton Steve Valance.
Hey, hello everybody.
And our special guest this week, a long-time member and contributor to the Resident Evil fan community. If you read a fan-made timeline in the early to mid-2000s, it was probably his. Since then, he's gone on to be a permanent member of the Resident Evil podcast panel. It's Sean Hall, aka STARS Tyrant.
Hello everybody, how are we doing?
This episode of the podcast, like all others, was recorded live in our Discord server. Join now to hear the podcast early and unedited, as well as engage with our community, contribute to the show and other upcoming projects, and be informed first of everything going on behind the scenes. You can find a link to the server in the description of this podcast or on our social media accounts. You can also support the show on Patreon for as little as $1 a month with various tiers, each with their own perks. Check out patreon.com/FA Spray Pod for a full list and the chance to create bonus First Aid Spray content. So, a little bit of housekeeping at the top of the show. We dived around this last episode because we had quite a lot to get through, but it is worth mentioning. So I'm going to try and get through this as neatly as possible. So, always starting off with the latest Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to Zachary Maguire. Thank you to Lewis Rogers. Thank you to James Payne. Thank you to Lawrence Knott. And thank you to Mikey Russell for supporting the show. It means everything. Those guys are now able to listen to our Dino Crisis 2 bonus episode that came out Patreon exclusive. There's a month's worth of exclusivity there, and it's going to go public on the 19th of March, around that time at least. And later on this month, we'll be recording our second bonus episode, which is all about the original Silent Hill game, as voted on by Patreon supporters. So that'll be going up for Patreon supporters for a month, and then as usual, everyone publicly will get it from then on. So that's in the pipeline, as well as several YouTube videos. We've always got stuff coming out. We're really hitting our stride with it now. So if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, you should. We've got a brand new URL. It's youtube.com/First Aid Spray Podcast. It's not quite uniform with everything else because, you know, YouTube just have to be awkward. But yeah, we've been putting out consistent stuff there. Most recent videos looking at characters we'd like to make a comeback. Some overlooked games in the series coming out very soon. Look at the evolution of how zombies have behaved across the series as well. So there's always stuff going on there, and there's plenty more to come as well. And also, on top of everything else, we have now made our way over to Twitch, finally, kind of out of the blue, in fact. So you can follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/FA Spray Pod. As I just mentioned there, Steve has been playing Remake 2 knife-only runs and recently been playing Director's Cut Advanced mode. James has been playing Remake 1 and Remake 2 solo by himself for the first time, and I am playing Silent Hill right now in preparation for that bonus episode because I've never actually played the original Silent Hill, so it's been a pretty cool experience. So with all that out of the way, let's circle back around to what we're here to do today and introduce properly our guest, Mr. STARS Tyrant. Many of you will know who he is. We definitely got a crossover between our two shows. I've seen people who started out as First Aid Spray Discord server members popping over there to the Resident Evil podcast server as well, and vice versa, definitely. So it's cool to properly extend that bridge. So STARS, why don't you start with sort of the question I always like to ask guests is, where did you start with Resident Evil, and kind of why it connected with you so much that you're still a fan all these years later?
Well, that's a long story when you've got like nearly 2 decades under, well, no more than 2 decades under your belt. So I started the series getting the Saturn version in December 1997. And really just hit it off, and it back then before the story took over, it was mainly sort of the atmosphere and the experience of playing quite a cinematic game. But I wouldn't say the love truly started. And as anyone who has listened to the podcast I'm on, or seen any of my streams or follow me on Twitter, Resident Evil 2 was where it sort of made it for me. The storytelling in that game I still reference this day as a turning point. 1998 was a very special year for gaming, and I think Resident Evil 2 was one of the sort of leaders of that, with its just ridiculously dazzling production value. And then it kind of went on to join in the community. In 2002, I joined the forums on a site that's now known as Rely on Horror. It was RE Horror at the time. And I eventually worked on what was the timeline, which was one of the first sort of attempts at piecing together in a chronological order all the files, all the events, and everything in the series. And then around just before Resident Evil 5 came out, that relationship broke down, which I won't go into, but it ended with me sort of departing that site and sort of giving up on the timeline. And then I sort of went dormant for a few years until I heard what was at the time the Project Umbrella podcast, begged Nick, who I knew as Neptune from my RE Horror days, to let me on in a guest role, to which they did. And then that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, now a permanent member of that panel, and I know this conversation came up on that server quite recently. Somebody mentioned that sort of when you joined and when Romby joined, that's when it felt like, really started to hit your stride over there. I completely agree with that. Like, you guys have definitely become a unit in the same way that I feel like we sort of maybe had the first shaky few episodes, but it came together. But yeah, it's crazy to think, with the podcast now, which obviously I discovered that podcast several years ago, I think completely by happenstance. I've been sort of in and out of the community myself for many, many years, like now more so than ever, obviously. But we probably bumped into each other on those websites back in the day. That now and then I would have been much younger. I definitely remember reading the timeline and stuff like that. So it's really weird to think that we've sort of been on the periphery of each other for all this time. But it's a very special time for the Resident Evil community with stuff like Discord and with Twitter being so active as it is. For everyone to sort of reconnect or make new partnerships through that as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel Discord's really changed the sort of landscape for the community, because Resident Evil is such a sort of in-depth story game. It was always sort of right at home on forums to be able to, spend a long time typing out a really eloquently worded like lore breakdown. And I do feel that Discord's taken some of that away, but at the same time, it's so much more immediate, so much more, inclusive of everybody.
Right,
everyone can just sort of get mucked in and just chat about anything. I know there's a lot of people who get intimidated by the lore, and I think sometimes when they used to go on like these big forum posts from the likes of Batman and Newsbot, they would think, God, how can I possibly contribute? And I think Discord's broke down those walls a little bit and invited so many more people in, and I think that is a positive. As much as I think I'll miss the forum aspect of the community, like this has been a more than adequate replacement, like the future of Discords and these, like I say, these more interactive channels, like you can do a live podcast like this and get everybody included. I think that's really good.
Yes, absolutely. I have very hazy memory of the forums. Like I say, I was much younger. I don't know if I was necessarily looking at big lore breakdowns so much as like caption competitions. That's the thing I remember the most. But it's a crazy time. And I know, obviously, we don't like to do this too much as this goes out recorded as well. But shout out to the chat, everyone turning up today. It's very cool to see. So shout out to you guys. And also I want to do a shout out, speaking of the community, we are graced with another guest of a sort in this episode. So to give a little bit of a history on it, our profile episodes, the first one we did was about Rebecca, and we were lucky enough to stumble across the fact that the strategy guide for the game had some sort of Rebecca perspective kind of pieces that we kind of took them and said, well, we'll just make them the file readings, get an actress to record that, and that was really cool. With our Barry episode, he's written a file himself, so we'll take that and something else from Rev 2, but it was a real struggle to get something from Sherry. And then I had the light bulb one day, and I approached Distant Memories 1996, who has kindly written some longer form pieces for us. So they are longer file readings in this episode, but they're completely original from Distant Memories. So a special shout out to him for the hard work he put into putting them. Something very special for this particular episode. So we will be talking about Sherry very, very soon, but first the major part, I'm sure everyone's waiting to hear what we have to say about what's going on in the news.
Okay then, everybody. So there was no news. Capcom have acknowledged that there is going to be a demo soon. No confirmed date as of yet, and there is. I think it's expanded a bit more since, because we've actually had streams. But there's been a 30-minute gameplay, and now Catastrophe and I believe the Japanese community guys have also done a stream of Resident Evil 3. I think it's like the street or the opening section.
Right, it's hard exactly to tell where it is, but apparently it's not the from the demo, this sort of stream that we saw recently this week, and which is where all the gameplay footage has come from, the same section of the game. So it's our first time sort of seeing the game in action. So there's quite a lot to dissect here. I mean, I don't quite know where to start, so let's just go around the room. Like, the most striking thing to me was seeing some of the enemies, seeing the Drain Demos back, or, well, albeit slightly differently. I was very excited to see those creatures redesigned and to get the nod. I'm not quite sure. I wasn't expecting them to be cut or anything, but I suppose I was quite hesitant to see how they'd be approached, because they're quite overlooked. They're quite minimalist in Resident Evil 3. Almost want to say forgettable in Resident Evil 3, really. They don't have the same presence that the Ligger and the Hunter have from the first 2 games. But I'm very excited about that. And obviously we've got plenty of Nemesis as well. Stars, what was the most striking thing from you from the most recent sort of selection of gameplay footage?
I think it's so great to see Jill in this environment as well, because she's been a bit unloved for the last few years, I think. And I think particularly when Kat sort of showed off the character model yesterday, I just thought she looked absolutely exquisite. And like I've said in a few videos and on Twitter, I'm in a very different place with this one to where I was with Resident Evil 2. With Resident Evil 2, I was just met with fear and worry over like potential damage it was going to do to the cannon, and now I think many of us have sort of adopted it. It's a kind of side cannon, so that's kind of okay. I'm sort of all for that. I'm all for it with this one to just go crazy with changing everything. So I was like, I'm actually quite impressed with how far they seem to have gone with the changes. I'm not too hot on some of the enemy redesigns. I think it as nice as it is to see like the Drain Demos put back in it, I really hope we get to see like a bigger bipedal one, because it was always more interesting that way, I feel. But as a redesign and a remake, in many ways it looks totally different, but in other ways it feels very, very much a unique spin on that game in a way that Resident Evil 2 wasn't. And I don't really know how to say that, how it is in my head at the minute. But like Resident Evil 2 at times felt a little bit safe up until the minute it wasn't, and then I feel they changed too much. Whereas this feels like it has like the DNA of Resident Evil 3 that's still recognizable, but doing it an entirely different spin, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean, definitely. With RE2 Remake, when you look back at it, there's a lot of whiplash there almost, where it is very clearly just a HD built from the ground up remake of RE2. It does play it safe. And then there's sudden moments where it goes wildly different. Whereas this, you started with the DNA, but you've built it intentionally to be its own thing from the ground up. Steve, for you, what was the big takeaway?
Can we talk about the star of the show?
Sure.
Yeah. That's Super Jump. All right. The entire combat with Nemesis, the way he's running, the way he literally is a relentless nightmare. I'm looking forward to that. The Drain Demos, as we all touched on, they feel like have they 100% confirmed the spiders are in? Because it feels like they've halfway housed somewhere between a Drain Demos, a spider, and a Chimera. They're just basically gone, let's take a little bit of this.
Yeah, they've not mentioned it outright.
You know? The whole, they implant you and you have to get rid of it or you're going to chest burst thing. That's definitely something new. I don't know how true that is, but that would give them a unique thing. Like, for example, hunters are fond of decapitations, lickers have a tongue. So I can get behind making them a bit more unique. I mean, it wasn't until recently the entire community went, oh God, they have babies in the original game.
I wonder if these are the babies that we're seeing, and I'm hoping, like Sean said, that there is a bigger, scarier mama one, like a fully grown. I think that's very possible, because this is, this section of the game that you're seeing them in this display that we've had is clearly a nest. So it's very possible that there's going to be something extra going on there.
It may well Drain Demos Queen.
Yeah, it may well be a boss fight or something.
Yeah, maybe so. That's a way to bring another boss fight into RE3, which, it sorely needs.
That too. Admittedly, it's still Nemesis, but he's got terrible accuracy with it, but he does have a flamethrower, and it looks to be some kind of a good throwdown there. That obviously is entirely new. It seems to be on the rooftop, so maybe it's the final battle where you shoot him and he falls off and dies.
Yes, that's
the Umbrella Corps. Umbrella Chronicles.
Thanks for that.
I can imagine the outcry right now.
Oh dear.
I will say that I'm quite impressed with how locked down the game is. Because, like, if anyone watched Kat's stream, the 30-minute sort of demo she did, it was very locked down in what she was allowed to show. And indeed, like, she went up to the entrance to the pharmacy, but wasn't allowed to sort of go in and show us it. And I think that's pretty good because, the one sort of big takeaway you can take from that footage Kat showed was there was the hint of the clock tower and the City Hall gem puzzle. So I think that's a kind of way of saying these areas are in the game, but you're not going to get a chance to see them now. And I think if they can keep as much of the game locked down, I think that'll be great because people just want to see too much in the promo now. I'm not even sure I want the demo, to be honest, because I'm just so worried it's going to get data mined to hell.
Yeah, exactly. That's the worry, isn't it? Yeah.
They need to curate it or something, like, go through it. I don't know how difficult that would be, but to basically pull everything they can out of the demo to make it still functional.
It's worth saying, actually. I meant to say it at the sort of top of the show, actually. I completely forgot, but might as well say it now. We're going to try and go spoiler-free in our server outside of Capcom release material from here on out. We were one of the websites, one of the communities, whatever you want to say, that posted up those leaked screenshots as soon as they came out. And in retrospect, I didn't agree with my overexcited decision to do that. So we won't be doing that moving forward because... people deserve to have us, go in this as blind as possible. So moving forward, if there is any leaks, data mine or otherwise, we won't be talking about them. We won't be posting them in the server on Twitter or anything like that. We're going to be avoiding that. Of course, we are a month out now, so we're getting close, and there's still so much we don't know. Like you said, I was watching that stream, especially when she was saying, like, oh, we're not going to do this, we're not going to go here, because spoilers, which, definitely appreciated that. But, one of the things that we went crazy over when we did our Remake 3 reveal episode was who is Dr. Bard, which is on the map. We still have no idea. We've only seen one screenshot, basically, of the hospital. Nothing else. We haven't seen the clock tower at all. So still tons of mystery, which is great. So what do we think about the characters? Because personally, we've seen a lot of Carlos in that gameplay stuff as well, and I'm all about it. I love the new Carlos. Steve, what do you think?
Right, okay. Yeah, I know he's ruffled a little feathers with his dialogue a bit. But I would say that overall, I actually do like him as a character. He's more appealing to, I don't mean the word be around, than classic Carlos. Classic Carlos always made me cringe, whereas this one, he still does, but it's kind of more entertaining. And it's Miguel from Tekken as well, so I'll take it.
Sean, what about you? What do you think about the new character designs?
I don't mind. I mean, I'm a little less on Carlos because I like to keep the redesigns as recognizable as possible, and I still maintain that I think if you were to take Carlos in Remake 3, show him out of context, like just as a an independent screenshot with no caption or anything, no one would know who he was.
Yeah, I agree with
make that Carlos association. But the rest of the mercs are actually very recognizable, and they all have like their trademarks. From Murphy having his little beanie hat thing. Nikolai looks less sort of foreboding in this one and less intimidating, if you like. He's which is probably again will work in terms of like the mystery of the character.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of like redesigns, I'm more interested to see what they're going to do with like the new content. I really like the fact that you're going to have Murphy and Carlos on their own little escapade. It's going to be, I think Batman's touched on this, that the fact that like Tyrell and Nikolai are the monitors. It's going to be interesting to see if there's any sort of rivalry going on there. So
yeah, there's room to explore, definitely.
Yeah, so I'm not in terms of the characters, like the redesigns, I think work pretty well. So it's just a couple of the enemies that I'm a bit unsure of, but
yeah, that's fair enough.
I'm sure the final game will silence me.
Forgive me for a second, because obviously #fake Resi fan here. Right. Was Mikhail always the one in charge? Because he seems to be in charge now. I always thought Nikolai was the head honcho of the original crew.
Mikhail was
STARS.
always the leader.
Right, okay.
Was he always the leader? Right, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
See, I
because
wasn't
obviously-
aware of that either.
No one knows that Nikolai is a monitor at this point, working directly underneath Umbrella. So
Yeah, it's just I don't remember it ever being spelled out that Mikhail was head of the group, but I'm okay with it. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure it probably was, and I must have missed it somewhere.
He was just a guy really in pain, and then that's grenade throws, you know?
I was just going to say, hopefully he'll get a massively expanded story.
Yes,
because I think he has the most potential too. You can't give a character like that a hero moment and then leave him sort of unfulfilled story wise.
Definitely.
I say he's a discreet fan favorite, isn't he?
Yeah, he is definitely.
And finally, let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. So we've seen more of the return of that dodging mechanic, which is, I think when we saw it in the sort of the 10 seconds of gameplay that we'd seen previously, we just kind of mused that they'd straight up ripped out the Rev 2 dodge mechanic. It's obviously very different. Comes right down to having a perfect dodge, depending on your timing as well. Kat showed this off a little bit in her stream as well, so it's good to see it like in live gameplay setting. Looks quite interesting. Definitely looks like more expanded than the simple aim your gun at the right time and hope for the best method of the original RE3. Ty, how do you feel about the dodge mechanic? And obviously you've got exploding barrels coming back and the power generators that go boom as well.
Yeah, so it's nice to see those gameplay things return. And I did actually have a quick chat with Kat on her Discord, and she confirmed it is basically the Revelations 2 dodge, and it's done with R1 and a direction. And it'll make you do like a lunge, whichever way you're sort of pointing the analog stick. But if you time it perfectly with an enemy attack, it will do that slow-mo thing, if you like, which will lead into like a counter-attack opportunity.
Yes.
Which Kat didn't show us yesterday, but if you've seen the other footage, you'll see where Jill can do like a quick aim while she's in slow motion and get some shots off. And apparently that's quite integral for the Nemesis fights.
Interesting. And that sort of, I'm a fan of that, and I'm a fan of, and I didn't mention it, but the fact that you don't use defense items this time around. If you get grabbed, you have to power them off by tapping a button. It seems to fit Jill better, who's obviously like a hardened soldier compared to Leon and Claire. That she's able to be a bit more action focused. She can fight back a little bit more, and she can be a bit more wily in combat. Steve, how do you feel about the gameplay tweaks?
I'm loving it, to be honest. I kind of wonder just how loose the window is, for the perfect dodge. Because even in the first gameplay, the 13-minute gameplay, that isn't infallible. If you get the perfect dodge and something else is going to hit you, you still can be killed by it. I mean, they demonstrate it pretty well just before they showed the Nemesis boss fight proper, I think.
Yeah.
But no, overall, I'm generally on board. I like the idea, because Revelations 2's dodge was probably what kept me playing the game in raid mode for so long. It's an entirely fresh mechanic that helps, and it's not as wonky as Revelation 1. The whole flip round and shoot thing, it's very reminiscent of original RE3 if you're using the pistol, because Jill could take an action stance with that and fire at a much greater rate of fire. It didn't really help, but you could do it. It's nice that it's like a nice little blending of mechanics. That being said, I apparently you can down Nemesis, is this right? But I haven't seen anyone do it yet, and apparently it gives you rewards.
Yes, I've read that as well, which is good. So these are all little things in RE3 that they've actually brought forward.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting indeed. Although I wonder if I'm going to really have the guts to do that when I can't even do it on classic RE3.
It is weird, like shades of RE5 though, with these like power generators and barrels and boxes everywhere. I know there were barrels in RE3 proper. I mean, there was environmental stuff. It for some reason it feels reminiscent of our little trips to Africa. Maybe it's just
That's fine. You can give a nod to different parts of the timeline. Why not?
There's surely got to be some exploding street lamps this time as well. just to surprise everybody all over again.
That's right. Love it. Okay, well, that should wrap up the news. Let's move into our main subject of this podcast. And now, original diary entries written by Distant Memories 1996, who you can follow on Twitter at DistantMemory96, read in character as Sherry Birkin by Kiki, who you can follow on YouTube at Kiki Cakes.
September 14th, 1998. Last night there was a horrible thunderstorm that came through Raccoon City. The rain was coming down so hard it sounded like 1,000 footsteps on top of our house, and there were several loud crashes of lightning that flashed from my bedroom windows. The crazy storm going on wasn't the only thing interrupting my sleep. For the past few weeks, starting around the end of August, I've been having these really scary dreams. They've gotten so bad that I don't think I can call them dreams anymore, since they're more like nightmares now. The strange thing is that they begin and end the same way. Mommy and Daddy have said to me that they could be night terrors and that, like all things, I'll grow out of them in time. In the nightmare, I'm sitting at my desk in my school, Raccoon Elementary, in the classroom with the other kids that go there. They're all talking loudly with each other. Their conversations sound like they have marbles in their mouths because I can't understand a word they say at all. None of them are talking to me, and when I try to call out to them or get their attention, they slowly turn around, staring at me with a sad look on their face. Some of them have tears rolling down their eyes. Before I can say anything to them, they wave goodbye and disappear in front of me like some kind of ghost. I'm the last kid in the room, alone. Before I wake up, I hear broken glass followed by these horrible screams coming out from in the hall. After all of that, I usually wake up. It's then that I'm the one screaming as I look around my room, but nothing is there. My parents are either asleep or working late at their jobs overnight. They work for Umbrella, making all these new medicines for the people of Raccoon City, but sometimes I wish they were around more at home. It gets lonely and kind of creepy being home with no one around. When I have these nightmares and no one else is there, all I can do is hide under my covers until I feel safe again. September 15th, 1998. It was around dinner time, since that's usually the only time I get to see or talk to them, when I overheard Mommy and Daddy talking about a new building in Raccoon City. I sat at the table, eating my food, just listening to them talk, but I knew I had never heard them mention this place before. They were talking about a place they called the orphanage that was built by Umbrella for all the unfortunate kids who don't have a mommy and daddy to take care of them. I don't get to see my parents very much, mainly because of their job, but I couldn't imagine not having them at all. I asked them about it when they were done talking, about all the kids who live there too, but when I did, both of them got angry at me for asking my question. My teachers in school always say I should ask questions of things I don't understand. They told me to never speak about it again and to focus on my schoolwork instead. I tried to ask them why, but they just ignored me and quickly left out the door to go back to work. I hope all of those kids have a nice place to stay with people who care about them. Today in school, I noticed that there are a lot of kids and teachers out sick. Maybe they caught the nasty flu that the news has been talking about going around town. It seems like everyone is getting sick with it. My mommy and daddy are probably working on a new medicine to cure all the sick people at the Raccoon General Hospital. When I go to school now, it feels just like my nightmares. More and more kids are absent from class. I heard in the cafeteria at lunch it's like that for other classes too. I just hope I don't get sick. I don't want to be a ghost like the ones in my nightmares.
Our main subject on episode 20 is Profile Sherry Birkin. So this is a character who has appeared in sort of 2 points of the history of the franchise, but luckily one of those points has been remade several times. So what we're going to do is break this up into sort of 1998 Sherry and then jump forward to 2012/present day. So let's go right back. There isn't a whole lot of backstory for Sherry, obviously, but I'll just give a brief introduction. Sherry Birkin was born 1986 to her parents William and Annette, both Umbrella researchers at this time working in the underground Raccoon City laboratory. We don't know much about Sherry's upbringing other than the fact that her parents were quite distant with her, putting their work before her a lot of the time. When the September 98 outbreak occurs, after her husband infects himself with the G virus, Annette tells her daughter to go to the Raccoon City Police Department to stay safe while she deals with the chaos in the lab and sewers under the city, unaware that the RPD is also very dangerous. There, a 12-year-old Sherry meets Claire Redfield, and the events of our first 3 games we're going to talk about take place. So let's start with the original RE2, where Sherry is portrayed by Lisa Jai. As I said, she's 12 years old. And so Lisa Jai, at the time of recording her lines, was 15, which is really cool as well. And just to start us off, I think what's most interesting about Sherry Birkin, and I hadn't thought about this until I started sort of collating my thoughts for this, is that if you look at Resident Evil 1 in a vacuum, Umbrella is a very faceless corporation. The closest we have to anything is a pile of dead bodies, zombies and stuff roaming around, and Wesker, who's not really Umbrella, he's kind of working as a triple agent. So you don't see any of the people behind anything. Back in 96, we didn't know about Spencer and Marcus and all of that. So to jump forward into 98 and have Resident Evil 2 and have not only some people working at Umbrella and seeing what's going on there with the Birkins, they also had a daughter who was going to be a sympathetic character. So for me, that is really tearing the lid off. Just going in, I can't even think about what it would have been like at the time. Such a wild turn of events to go from a faceless corporation to sympathising with a 12-year-old girl who's caught up in the madness of it. It gives it such a human element, and I think more than anything, that is what Sherry provides in Resident Evil 2. Steve, do you want to start us off? What are your thoughts about Sherry? What are your memories from sort of maybe your first playthroughs, if you can think that far back?
See, I would have been 12, so yeah, you can put the ages together, guys, I'm sure. So, yeah, the main thing I remember is it felt like that Sherry wasn't totally going to trust Claire from the get-go, because the first time that they properly meet, she runs away. And then the next time she meets, she hears a horrible monstrous growl, assumes it's her dad, and then legs it again. All right, now, there is something to be said about the tenacity and the will of a 12-year-old during what is essentially the visuals of a zombie apocalypse. Just go, I'm going to go and try and save my dad. I ain't got no weapons. I can take dog bites to the face about 20 times, but I ain't got no other skills, and I still go for it anyway. And I always respected that, the fact that Sherry just went for it anyway, despite the fact that there is immense danger. She went from her own home to the RPD by herself. We don't even see that, that kind of stuff still kind of stuck with me, that she's, actually kind of a badass when you think about it.
That is fair, even at 12. You can't say that about many 12-year-olds. Ty, what were your first experiences with the character of Sherry Birkin like? Because you mentioned Resident Evil 2 is where you sort of fell in love with the series. So was that maybe part of it at all?
To be honest, I love all of the interactions between what you would call the 4 main characters, Leon and Ada, and Claire and Sherry. And I love the sort of juxtaposition between the 2 campaigns. You have the very sort of cold, calculated Ada against the sort of maternal relationship that Claire and Sherry have. The mother and daughter thing I thought was done really, really well. And I always saw Claire and Sherry as a loving homage to James Cameron's Aliens with Ripley and Newt.
Yes.
A child character is, anyone who watches any kind of movies, plays any games, child characters are really, really hard to get right, because you have to tread a fine line with the writing, because you make them just slightly annoying and they can derail an entire movie or story or whatever. And I think Sherry is one of these characters, very much like Newt, in some ways like John Connor, that is able to exist within this story, still keep it believable, still keep it real, and actually make the relationship she forms with Claire in this case very endearing. And I think, in all honesty, that relationship is something that has defined Resident Evil 2 as a game, and it's one of the sort of things that, it's Claire's main personality trait that she displays through the series, and that obviously starts with her relationship with Sherry. Now, at the time of the sort of playing Resident Evil 2, and I'll just set this up now for later. But the impact of Sherry didn't really hit me that much, because I was always, and some people think this is scandalous, but I was always a Leon A, Claire B kind of player. Even though I always respected the canon was Claire A, Leon B, I prefer how the story unfolds better with Leon A and Claire B. So for so many years, I didn't really pay much attention to the fact that, Sherry's been infected by her dad with the G virus. She's got, an antivirus with the devil vaccine. And And it wasn't until we got a little project called Wesker's Report that I actually realised the significance of the character that she's going to become over the years. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. You actually hit on several things that I wanted to move on to next, so I appreciate that.
No worries.
My next note was comparisons to Newt. Obviously, Resident Evil 2 does get the sort of like, people comparing it to Aliens, and I feel like a lot of that comes from specifically Claire A, in fact, really. Oh, well, maybe both the Claire campaigns, just the Ripley and Newt relationship that Claire and Sherry seem to have, and there is kind of a little bit of chestburster action sort of going on in the campaign as well. And obviously little bits and pieces like that. But the other one that you mentioned that specifically I wanted to get onto as a point was, is Sherry annoying? I don't know if either of you guys ever found her annoying at all. And it made me think about it because I'd never thought about it before. And it seems that everyone slings that around at any sort of child character without really much thought, or any character that is in a lot of peril. Which obviously is the case with a lot of child characters that can't fend for themselves. So I did put it to our Discord, and our Discord unanimously agreed that they didn't ever find her annoying in the original RE2 or in the remake RE2. I don't feel like you have to do any of rescuing her, because like Steve said, she's very headstrong. She's sort of very capable already, which is a great character trait for her, and it reflects her backstory of kind of just being left to deal with things, which is pretty sad in an understated kind of way. They don't make that a big in-your-face thing.
But she's not a moody loner or anything. She's not a weirdo.
Exactly, yes. Exactly. They don't make her very... No, I don't want to use the term emo, but it's a bit before emo. But yeah, she doesn't spend the whole game moping about it. She realises, she can't reach the ventilation hole anymore. She'll find another way. Off she goes. And yeah, it's fantastic.
I think as well, one of the things that really blows me away about Resident Evil 2, and this is the original 98 version, that's something they didn't bring back for the remake, which I think was really unfortunate, is the mechanic where if you run ahead too fast, she'll actually sit down and wait for you. I just think at the time, I remember, as a teenager, I remember thinking, this is so frustrating, just keep up, I've got to go back now. I'm trying to do the A run here, and I can't be held up. But now, as I've grown up and become, much more mature, I respect that as a beautiful piece of like storytelling detail. And I really, really love the fact that if you stand close to her with Claire, they hold hands. Yes. I can't believe they did. I can't believe they didn't do that in the remake. I think that's such a missed opportunity for detail. But then Claire is a colder character in the remake, and this side of her doesn't come out until really like right at the end of the game.
That's fair. No, there's a good important details actually that are worth mentioning. They ride that line, don't they, for being capable, but also needing to have someone there in what is basically the apocalypse. Let's face it. What do we feel about? Do you feel like she is a 12-year-old in the game? Do you feel like she acts like a 12-year-old? Because I find in media a lot of the time, children are made unrealistically stupid sometimes. They'll say a character is 12 when they're acting more like 6 or 7, which it always confuses me. For me, she feels like an actual 12-year-old, maybe even slightly older, which again feeds into her backstory of having to fend for herself. Steve, did you feel like she was portrayed properly for her age?
I think overall, I'm kind of halfway between it, because obviously I live with a 15-year-old. I know what they're like. I kind of want to say no. I want to say that they're very much like, they feel like they're 9 or 10. They feel much younger. But that's not a slight against them, because that's just even more impressive at how badass she is.
Fair enough. Ty, how do you feel about
that? Yeah, I think she's about. I mean, obviously, I don't have any experience in that sense yet. But I mean, she's about where I would think she would be. But then, I'm sort of hindered with knowledge there. But she certainly never came across as like far off, if you like.
Yeah,
I never got the impression that she was younger than her years or older than her years. It just felt right, and I put that down to the credit of the storytelling in that game, to be honest, in the script. I mean, the script for Sherry and Claire is very good.
Definitely.
Even back in 98, it was strong.
It was a joy to watch all of those cutscenes back this morning for me, both Claire A and Claire B, because unlike you, I'd sort of do the reverse. I've always been a Claire A. Leon B, so especially nice to watch B. There's some powerful stuff in there, even 20 years later. In the B playthrough where she sees Annette die in front of her, the music and the way that performance is delivered as well is really good. Even for 20 years later, it's more than you can expect out of a video game from the late 90s. Everyone always makes fun of the Resident Evil kind of schlocky voice acting, and that's fair. But I think they really, Lisa Jai did an incredible job. I'd almost go as far as to say it's very close to being my favourite performance of the lot, if not my absolute favourite.
Yeah.
It's worth listening to the Crimson Head podcast, actually, that she was a guest on, to hear sort of some of her stories about recording that dialogue as well. So cheeky plug for them. They did an episode with her and Alison Court, aka Claire, as well, where she talks about how the script was handled with her only being 15 at the time as well. To be a fly on the wall of that room to hear that performance as well. So there's some sympathetic nature in Sherry. Obviously, she's the character that needs taking care of in certain aspects, especially late into the A game. My personal favourite moment, we'll go around the room I think with this, but my personal favourite moment is actually just when you get to the laboratory. She's wearing Claire's jacket and we have to go get the vaccine. And at this point, it'd be very cheap for have a child character just to be like, I'm terrified, I'm just going to cry all the time, which is how you make a character annoying. This is when it happens in the A playthrough, and it's not necessarily out of the horror of what's going on. What is so powerful to me is that it's delivered after the line where she remarks that it's nice to have someone there to help her. I found that, watching back today, incredibly powerful. She's not necessarily, I mean, she probably is breaking down about the whole situation, why wouldn't you? But it's the personal conflict inside there as well that I thought was striking even all these years later. Ty, what's your favourite Sherry moment from the original RE2?
I think I'm a bit hindered in this one because, like I say, that you don't get those moments because she's very much relegated in the Leon A. Claire B setup. But I would probably say that, to be honest, or the scene where she's first taken to the first office of the lab. I don't call it nest. Sorry, guys. Where she says it's nice to have someone to depend on.
Yes,
like you
that's
said,
right,
I think it's that line of dialogue, isn't it? And it's just watching that relationship sort of become stronger between the two characters, and I do think it's one of the things that Remake 2 missteps quite hard with.
We'll definitely get to that.
But yeah, I think you can pretty much handpick any moment with Sherry and Claire, and they're all wonderful. And it's down to the script and the voice acting. I mean, Alison's particularly strong in these scenes as well.
Yeah. Steve, what's your favourite Sherry moment from the classic RE2?
See, you guys are going for all the nice emotional deep stuff, and while I do agree, I think she gets like one of the best sequences in a Resi game ever when she saves the day by basically kicking a grate through and stopping a train.
It's true.
It's cheesy. It's cheesy, but the fact that, again, she's just got the wherewithal to go, right, okay, I'm going to just duck through here and then try and figure it out as I go, and it works out. And I don't know, maybe I'm just more of a fan of your cliche action nonsense. I really do appreciate that scene.
But do you know what, actually, it's worth pointing out, because it is very in line with what she's done for the rest of the game. She's not going to stand around and do nothing. She's going to try and help in the same way that she'll bring you a box full of grenades and somehow throw it 5 feet into the air.
Exactly. She's not sat on the sidelines. She's trying to save the day.
Right, she's an active part.
Yeah, it kind of annoys me that she didn't get that in Remake 2, to be honest. The whole saving the day bit right at the end.
No, that's actually a very good point. You got to feel for Sherry though. It is something that I forgot about until thinking about it today. Really, it's an often forgotten detail that she's chased by 2 monsters in this game. It's not just her infected dad. She's also chased by Mr. X for a while because of the pendant. So she's put in incredible amounts of danger, whether or not she's really aware of that. But circling back round to Monster Dad. Sherry Birkin, we actually did a video on tragic characters in the RE universe. Obviously, Sherry was on there. Do you think she's the most tragic character in Resident Evil, or does that maybe go to Lisa Trevor? Steve, what do you think?
I think if she is, I mean, I can't decide. I think Lisa's been through a lot, especially at age 14. But the one to come through and not have or not be traumatized, considering the level of abuse and horrible things that have happened to her. I think Sherry's like King, Queen. She just takes so much damage and just keeps going. Like, in a lot of people slate RE6. I'm sure we're going to get there, but Sherry in RE6 is like, she's come through on top.
Ty, what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, Steve's already got on to where we're going to go with this chat. But I mean, in terms of like tragic arcs, I would say Lisa's going to be all-time king.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of that, or queen, should I say? She gets through some horror. But the fact that, like Steve's just said, Sherry goes through all that and comes out a badass. And the great thing is, when we get there, I'll just do like a little hint to what I'm going to say. All of this comes from her inspiration to become who she is in 6 is all set up in 2 with the relationship she has with Leon and Claire. So it's rooted early on. And if anyone had any doubt, as I did when Sherry was first revealed as being a Resident Evil 6 character, and I was thinking, God, I'm not sure I like that. The game and the files and everything just was like, of course, it's perfect. Why didn't I think of that?
Yes, that's a nice little tease for the future of this episode. So before we close out RE298 and move forward slightly, well, I say move forward, we're going to still be handling the same subject matter, really. Where do you guys rank the classic Sherry? Is this either of you guys' favourite performance? No, that's a big no. Okay, well, there's the tease. So, let's move on to Darkside Chronicles, which is a game we haven't really covered all that much. Sherry does appear in Darkside Chronicles retelling of Resident Evil 2, so again, we're looking at the same sort of sequence of events, told slightly differently. For one thing, it's an on-rail shooter game, so you're definitely going to have to mix it up. She was portrayed by Laura Bailey in this version, an actress who's very synonymous with the Resident Evil series for playing multiple different characters, in fact. For me, I think this is the absolute weakest. I would say this game doesn't do a whole lot for Sherry, and we were talking about, does she feel 12? Does she feel capable? I feel like this game makes her very childish and very lifeless, but maybe that is down to the fact that the game is, it needs to take place over the course of basically an hour's worth of gameplay on rails, not really any cutscenes. Yeah, not a huge fan. Steve, you asked if we were going to cover Darkside, so I'll go to you next. How do you feel about Darkside's portrayal of Sherry?
I'm sorry for bringing it up. Honestly, they just she's like a, what do you call it? A damsel in distress kind of thing. She just runs off. They need to save her, and then she shows up at the end, cries. That's it. It's totally, completely against her entire character up until this point in the franchise. I don't, she's not just like a crying child who runs away, but that's all she is in Darkside Chronicle.
Right, exactly.
It's I hate to use harsh language, but it's pretty rubbish.
Something that just sort of rubbed me the wrong way was sort of watching this back.
It's lifeless.
It is lifeless. And the way that she sort of refers to Annette as mummy, just consistently as well, it just didn't make me think, oh, this is a 12-year-old girl. This is not what 12-year-olds, especially ones detached from their parents, act like for me. She just felt very childish. Stars, how do you feel about Darkside and its portrayal of Sherry Birkin?
Well, I think I'll get this out of the way now. I'm not a fan of Darkside Chronicles whatsoever. I think it missteps so many characters across both its retellings. The Ashfords and everything like that. I think more or less every character is totally mishandled, and Sherry included in that. The Birkins. I mean, they get Annette completely wrong as well. I think she doesn't feel like the same character she did in Resident Evil 2, and they'll carry that on with Remake 2. Unfortunately, the only thing I take from Darkside, and I do see this as canon, is the 3 audio files you can unlock.
Yes.
As much as I don't think they're quite performed as well as they could be, I liken this very similar to these 3 files. I liken very similar to the Daughters DLC in Resident Evil 7, in that it's nice to actually have some insight into what a Armageddon is like in the beginnings of it. And it's one of the only times you really get a feeling of like Annette's warning Sherry that something's gone wrong and everything's about to go very, very wrong. You don't get a lot. There's not much of the game that's set before an incident occurs. We always sort of tend to come through halfway or in the aftermath or whatever. So it's nice to actually hear something in the beginnings of it unfolding and the sheer panic of getting Sherry out the school, getting her to the RPD, and then when the RPD's not safe as well. I do quite like the panic. I don't think it's quite acted as well as it could be. It came across a little bit hammy. Like you say, the mummy references and stuff are not quite the Sherry we knew from Resident Evil 2, but I like the idea of them more than anything.
Yes, I agree with that. There's some choice details in there which are really nice. Annette specifically pulling her out of school as well and telling her to go home, pick up the locket and go to the RPD. That's a nice little detail. You can take that as lore if you like. And also her telling her to stay away from everyone, which is nice because when you think about it, in Resident Evil 2, as soon as she sees you, she's running away, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's some nice little sprinkling of details, but overall I agree. Not super well portrayed, which is a shame. It would have been nice to hear the original voice actors handling this perhaps, but hey ho, that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. I think that's really it with Darkseid. There's not a whole lot to say. It's quite a brief appearance, and it's not particularly worth dissecting. So we'll jump forward again to the second retelling of 1998 for Remake 2, Resident Evil 2 2019, where she was portrayed by Eliza Pryor. She's also a child actor, like Lisa Jai. I couldn't find her exact age, but she's a TV actor. I think she's in like a Nickelodeon shows, Disney shows, something like that. For me, this is very recognisably Sherry. Quite impressed with this. I think overall the game did I'd say it's a mixed bag with characterization. Some of them it gets perfectly, others not so much. But I thought Sherry was very much closer to the former. Sean, how do you feel about Remake 2 Sherry overall?
The problem I have with Remake Sherry is I don't see her growing up to be the character we see in Resident Evil 6, and that's a really big deal breaker for me. I know I might be alone in this, but I've been very vocal over the last year over the characterizations in Remake 2, and I think outside of Leon, I don't really feel like any character feels in many ways that they're recognizable enough to be like you know that's Ada, you know that's Claire, you know that's Sherry, but I really, as I said earlier, I really missed that relationship and how deep it got in the original 98 RE2, and I think it's criminally lightly touched upon in the remake, and I didn't get a great deal out of the orphanage sequence either, and I don't want to be too hard on Remake 2 because I feel like I've been hard on it over a year. And believe me when I say I actually do really like the game as a Resident Evil experience a lot. I just always say it's as a remake, it falls flat for me. As a Resident Evil experience, it's great, but as a remake, not so much.
That's fair enough. Like that happens with something that you love so dearly. Sometimes it does always sound like you're picking it apart, because that happens to the best of us. When we did our Resident Evil 3 episode, I remember putting it out thinking, oh no, have we just destroyed this game? Because I felt like we nitpicked everything. But I think that just goes to show how much it means to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily reflect your overall opinion.
Always hold the magnifying glass closest to the things you love, isn't it?
That's
yeah,
it. Yes,
exactly.
perfect. Yes, you make a good point though. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, and now that you say that, I completely agree. You don't see the through line so much looking back at this. On a surface level, definitely so. In terms of Remake, Sherry, the thing that I love most is the fact they changed the outfit. That's the outfit that needed changing the most, I'd say. The Japanese schoolgirl thing that they had in RE2 is, it's nice, it's classic, but it doesn't really fit with the fact the games are set in the US. Which is funny because you can look up concept art for Sherry for 1.5, which is a bit more American. So, but I was a fan of that. Steve, how do you feel about Remake 2 Sherry?
See, I kind of feel like there's shades of classic Sherry in there, but there is a lot more Newt this time around. Like that, someone watched Aliens a few more times when scripting, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
But I like particular moments that really stick out for me are the end sequence, like when are you keeping up with me, Sherry? Yeah, I've got strong legs and stuff like that. Like, yeah, okay, you're kind of a little badass now. And then the little bit of banter on the train where she says that, yeah, I promise I won't move. But then, before then, you've got like Newt. It's literally just Newt before the G fight, the first G fight, isn't it? Like, you need help. That whole bit just feels like, there's a monster behind you. And I kind of feel like that's a shame, It was nice when they weren't so over the head with the references. That being said, I do genuinely like the Sherry. She's not number one, but she's pretty good.
Yeah, for me, in terms of performance, it's up there. The performance is very, very strong. But there's some weird parts in there, like you mentioned when you first encounter her and she says you need help. It always felt like a very strange choice for somebody to say. It just feels out of place. But some of her interactions with other characters, some of them are really strong, but with Claire not so much. Like her stuff with Annette, I find quite, not to overuse the word, but again quite powerful. She's pleading with her mum at one point. You didn't pick up your phone, or anything like that. And her mum just says, I don't have time for this, which is awful, something awful to say to anyone in that circumstance, let alone your own child. And then when Annette dies, obviously, later in the game as well, that I think we touched on this in our villains episode where we talked about Annette, but that was spectacularly well played from everyone, especially Sherry. I thought that scene was very powerful. But yeah, not so much the kind of the Claire relationship. It's not the same Bond, certainly.
And it's something that the Six Files will elaborate on a lot, is how deep their relationship goes. And I don't know whether I necessarily got that from Remake 2.
I don't.
Which is just a shame. She's definitely more emotionally detached in Resident Evil 2, Sherry, I think.
Right, yeah. So the only thing that Remake 2 improves upon, in the sense that there's some depth there, perhaps, is the gameplay segment. Resident Evil 2 98 is fine enough, as Steve said, taking bites from zombie dogs like it's nothing at all. There's not too much to it, even less so in the sewer segment.
She's a tank.
She is a tank.
She's indestructible.
But there's not a whole lot to do there, whereas in Remake 2 she gets her own area to explore completely. Well, not completely her own, because Claire turns up later, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the orphanage, a couple of puzzles to solve, and then some Splinter Cell action hiding from Chief Irons. How do you feel about the orphanage segment, Steve?
I actually prefer it to Ada's segment, 100%. Mainly because if you know what you're doing, it's unfailable, even on like the hardest difficulty setting. And that's good for speedruns, kids. I actually like the idea. It feels like they may have looked at the cliff notes for like experimenting on children's very Resident Evil Survivor. But the little like documents like the person who runs this place is a policeman. Well, okay. I see where we're going now then.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Stars, how do you feel about the orphanage?
I'm not too hot on it, but it's a decent set piece, if you like. It's quite, it is if you. The first time through was reasonably tense. I like the fact that it had a decent puzzle in there. The orphanage I could go on with, but it was nice that Sherry got her own unique moment in the limelight that she didn't share with anybody else. That was the problem with 98 Resident Evil 2, is her and Ada's section is the same, except the fact that she can't climb a box quite as well. But the orphanage, it was a well thought out area, and it was a decent set piece. But I'm not too hot on it, to be honest. I don't treat it as canon, unfortunately.
That's an entirely different debate about me and Remake 2, definitely. It's one of those things that on first playthrough was quite interesting. Frankly, I think I remember sort of playing through the game and my wife paying a little bit more attention because it was interestingly different from what was going on previously. But it does suffer with repeat playthroughs. It's not much. Once you figure out the pattern and you just got to wait through it a little bit, it does become a bit of a drag. But as a unique moment in the game, it is cool they gave Sherry something to do. But again, in a strange way, it's a shame that it's hiding and not actually too much action. Although she does get to throw the acid in his face, now that I think about it. So that's cool, at least.
As a quick aside, have you guys seen the AVGN playthrough of this particular section? Because it's hilarious. Like you can that hide and seek section, like you can literally stand in front of him in certain places, just stare at him.
I've not seen that, no.
No, you need to check out the. I think it's Awesome Games Done Quick. I think it's their speedrun. I want to say it's
right, yeah.
But obviously they break the game in various ways because speedrunners can do magical things and like turn a knife into a grenade launcher or whatever. But, that sequence made me like I was howling with laughter because you just stand there and just yell at the chief pretty much. You're just staring him down.
You confused the hell out of me there because you meant AGDQ and you said AVGN.
Yeah, sorry.
Angry video game nerd.
No, I'm getting my YouTube stuff mixed up. Sorry. No, Awesome Games Done Quick. Awesome Games Done Quick.
Is it just because Irons' scripting is fundamentally broken then or something?
Yeah,
Must be, right,
you can stand almost in front of the door where you'll get to at the end and he just walks past you. It's, yeah.
That's great. I'll have to look that up, certainly. Okay, well, let's round out. I don't know if anyone has any final points on Remake to Claire. Remake to Sherry. But before we move into the future, out of the three, I'm guessing it goes without saying that the original RE2 is the preferable for everyone here. I know it is for me. Steve, are you siding with the OG?
Yeah.
Yeah, thought so. Sean, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm obviously 98 Sherry, and I think that leads in well to the Resident Evil 3 epilogue as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
And the Resident Evil 3 epilogue's really nice, and they actually remade the image in one of the promo shots for the Resident Evil 2 remake where she sat by the window. And it just implies the loneliness. And I think I can't remember how the structure of Resident Evil 3 and whose you unlocked first. I think you possibly unlocked Claire's first. And it is worth saying at this point that the English version of Claire's epilogue is a lot colder. It just looks like she basically abandons Sherry and Leon. That's not quite the case. In the Japanese version, Leon actually encourages Claire to go. Look for Chris. I'll look after Sherry. Everything will be fine. Whereas in the English version, he's more like, you're looking for your brother. Just go. And then I think you unlock Sherry's epilogue, and she's just like all alone, sat by the window, and she's the only thing that keeps her going is the thoughts that Claire will come back. And I think that's it's a thing worth remembering as we move on into the future.
Yes, absolutely. Considering how many years it was until we finally saw her again as well, that's what we were left with, Okay.
And the one other little thing in there. Are we doing Wesker's report shortly, or
you can feel free.
Yeah, so obviously Sherry's significance, personally from my point of view, Sherry's significance wasn't really highlighted until we got a nice little promo DVD that came with the Code Veronica X port for the PlayStation 2. And basically at the end of Wesker's report, which was a 20-minute promo video, if anyone's ever seen it, you can watch it online. Wesker narrates through the first 3 games of the series and finishes with a little, it's almost like a Marvel post-credit scene, if you like, and it shows Sherry behind the bar, behind metaphorical bars, if you like. And he just basically muses that there's something special about this little girl. And there you go.
Love that. See, that's the sort of stuff that you get to hear if you listen to the Resident Evil podcast. Real in the weeds stuff. Love that.
See, I was right good when I got CVX on the PS2 because all I got was a Devil May Cry demo. I never got Wesker's report. It
was like a game, or would it be Electronics Boutique at the time? I think it was a pre-order bonus, and it was very limited. You had to it was first come first serve on the day, I think.
I say they got Richard Ward to voice it and everything as well.
Right.
They did, yeah. And it is mostly canon, but for a couple of awkward bits. So generally, if you the rule is just take the text, don't take the video.
Oh right, okay. I was about to ask that. Yeah, good to know.
But yeah, it's on YouTube if people want to watch it. And like I say, ignore the images because it uses that tricky mix of Leon A, Claire B footage for Resident Evil 2, and then mixes it up with Claire A, Leon B. So the actual version of events you get is quite broken. But the actual text works. And just as a brief aside, I'll not go into this too much, but there has been a couple of revisions with Wesker's report over the years. And there was one version which actually took out that final moment with Wesker musing over Sherry. That has since been put back in because it can work with what we know later in Resident Evil 6. So we'll get into that.
Interesting.
December 23rd, 2012. September 1998, a turning point in my life. There are times when I fight with myself to forget it, but horrible memories are much harder to shake when a part of it will always be with you. I remember each and every moment in torment, a constant reminder in the daytime hours, but haunts me ever still in the dark of night as I toss and turn in my sleep. The twisted, rotting faces of Raccoon City's citizens, the hellish imagery of the other creatures that prowled the city's streets, and the overall destruction of a place I used to call home are always staring back at me when I close my eyes. If it wasn't for the brave efforts of Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield, two seemingly unlikely survivors in a city gone completely mad with disease, I would have perished from this world and burned in the flames that swallowed it whole upon its eradication. The day we walked down that lonely stretch of highway, with the summer's afternoon sun setting on our faces, stained in the dirt and blood from the dead city behind us, I felt something deep inside. I remember, in what seemed like the first time in a long time, like I could have a family again. We were all incredibly tired beyond words, our bodies exhausted of all energy. I thought we were going to pass out completely before anyone found us. I do remember taking a break from our walk, before we reached the quarantine zone set up by the United States government, to rest. All I remember is the sound of the wind that was blowing off the Arclay Mountains, some birds crying off in the distance, and the silence of it all when compared to the chaotic events of the nightmare we had escaped from mere moments ago. It was when we reached the U.S. Armed Forces, who were covered in special biohazard suits and carrying huge automatic assault rifles in hand, that the feeling of family I was beginning to feel was to be taken from me again. They had so many questions, most of which I could not answer. Leon ended up being recruited by the United States as an agent for the president. Claire was let go from custody and left for Europe to search for her missing brother Chris. And I was placed into protective custody due to my parents being tied directly to the Umbrella Corporation. We had one more brief conversation amongst each other that day, before we went our separate ways, but both promised me that we would see each other again when all of this was over. It's now 2012. Once I was of adult age and granted clearance from the United States, and following the events of what happened in Raccoon City, I took it upon myself to make a promise, a personal vow to myself, for all of the lives that were lost in that nightmare, to join the fight so that it would never happen again. There were several anti-bioterror groups popping up all over, but the two most notable groups were the BSAA and the DSO. The DSO, the Division of Security Operations, was the perfect place to carry out that newfound promise, giving me the security and support I needed so that I could better help the people of the world that were ravaged by the pain of bioterrorism. They were founded and funded by the United States government directly under the President himself, which in that case would be our acting Commander-in-Chief, President Adam Benford. The world may have been prematurely exposed to the horrors of viral outbreaks thanks to Umbrella, but even after bankruptcy, the legacy they left behind would go on to influence countless other groups. As a direct result of their actions, others sought out to do harm to others just as Umbrella did all those years ago. It's with that said that sometimes I do feel out of place here, both in the DSO and the world overall. My last name being Birkin holds a considerable amount of weight to it, given that both of my parents were head researchers for the Umbrella Corporation, along with the original creators of the G virus. A virus which, following the events of Raccoon City, courses through these veins alongside the blood in my body, working in miraculously perfect harmony. Many would consider my situation, despite the dreadful circumstances surrounding its existence, a small gift in of itself due to the incredibly resilient healing factor the virus provides me with. I often like to think of it as both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it allows me to gain the upper hand in the fight against the horrors I come face to face with in the field, but a curse since my gift was what cost me both of my parents. I often wonder now about how Mom and Dad would view the world they left behind. In addition to how they would feel about their only child being consequently still infected with the G-virus in a way, but being used to stop the kinds of things that they were making in Umbrella's laboratories. I've had to come to terms with their passing, and now know that they loved me very much. They were just victims of Umbrella's will, in one way or another, and a victim of circumstances that even they could not have foreseen happening around them. There's a nasty thunderstorm rolling in above the clouds outside from my office window. The rain pouring down heavily onto the glass, with lightning periodically flashing from the sky. I hate when it rains. I always did, even when I was a kid, because it meant I couldn't play outside. But ever since Raccoon City, all it does is make me remember memories I would soon wish to forget.
Okay, so let's move onwards. I've got a bit of a sort of preamble here to sort of fill in the gap between 1998 and 2012. As with all of our profile episodes, the shout out here goes to projectumbrella.net for their spectacular profile on the character. So I've taken some choice parts. Please bear with me as I fill in, 14 years of gap there. So after escaping from Raccoon City, Birkin and Kennedy were taken into protective custody by the US Army. The reasons for this were that she still harboured active traces of the G-virus and its antibodies, and she also required protection from Umbrella and their rival company. After an agreement between Kennedy in which he agreed to become an agent in exchange for her safety, Birkin was kept within the custody of the government, where they then began observation and research on her body for the virus and its antibodies within. Birkin was placed under house arrest and had become the only person in the world with a resistance to the G-virus, making her of great significance both politically and as a military asset, and giving her top secret status. Over the next 11 years, although the advance of the virus within Birkin was halted when she was inoculated with the Devil vaccine, a small amount of the G-virus remained in her body. In the government's custody, she was subjected to various experiments in relation to the virus and its antibodies at a government research institution. In the process, by the time she grew up, she could completely control the virus's power and could physically regenerate, and had gained a viral resistance. In addition, her aging process had halted around the age of 20 due to the virus's influence, giving her a more youthful appearance than her actual age implied. With no relatives, a high-ranking government official, Derek C. Simmons, became Birkin's substitute guardian, and in 2009, Albert Wesker was killed. Umbrella and their rival company had long since collapsed, and as a result, Birkin had no further need for protection, and the experiments on her had been completed. The government offered her a deal to become an agent in exchange for her freedom from house arrest. She accepted the deal and was inducted as an agent under the exclusive direct control of the US National Security Advisor, her substitute guardian, Derek C. Simmons. Though she was still under the strict surveillance of the government, she was now free from confinement and later became an agent of the DSO, the Division of Security Operations. Claire Redfield attempted to persuade Birkin to resign as an agent many times, but with no success. Birkin firmly believed in her desire to carry out her missions in order to stop bioterrorism from claiming more victims like herself. So that brings us to Resident Evil 6. December 2012, where Birkin is ordered by Simmons to infiltrate the Adonia Republic and extract Jack Mueller, a mercenary and the son of Albert Wesker, who harbours antibodies to the C-virus, a new virus which had recently been used in bioterrorism around the world. She finds Mueller in the middle of the Civil War and escapes with him, being pursued by the Usternak. So this is portrayed, this time around, Sherry is portrayed by Eden Reigel. She's around the age of 26, but as I said, she looks younger due to the G-virus. And as is the way with Resident Evil 6, she's part of two, like a pairing of characters. So she's the third, I guess, pairing with Jake. When you go into Resident Evil 6 to boot up a campaign, as I did recently to play through this, you've got Leon, you've got Chris, you've got Jake. I made a little noise and I said to myself, Jake's campaign, my ass. This is all about Sherry. So Sherry is the lead character as far as I'm concerned in a campaign. I don't know if you guys agree with that. Steve, when you played Resident Evil 6 the first time, did you play as Jake or did you play as Sherry?
I was doing it co-op and I played as Sherry. So we did have both people going on. I played all of RE6 co-op first time.
Did you elect to play as Sherry or were you just sort of lumped with it?
It was a case of I played as Leon, my buddy played as Chris, and then they were like, "Mad, they are a Wesker fanboy to the end of the earth." And they'd already seen Jake's face, went, he's Wesker's son. So I was like, yeah, that's okay. Sherry's cool enough.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It works out.
Little did I know, the
exactly.
best returning Resident Evil character is, in fact...
Ty, did you play as Sherry the first time when you booted up Resi 6?
I certainly did.
Of course. So you touched on some points here. We sort of teased some various bits and pieces. So let's talk about characterization. Sean, you might as well start us off. How do you feel about Sherry being realised in RE6 the way that she was?
Right, well, Resident Evil... Sherry was always a bit of an enigma for a number of years in the series. And ever since, I think, Wesker's report gave everybody that neat little coda that there was something more to her than meets the eye, there was a demand from the fans to basically have a return in some sort of capacity. And honestly, the reaching over the years to try and get her back, from myself included, I think I was one of the people who was like, when we first got the photo of Ashley Graham in Resident Evil 4, I was like, that's Sherry. That's a witness protection program, and she's got contact lenses in. And obviously, as it happened, the community went nuts, convincing themselves it was Sherry, and then it wasn't. And then I think there was a bit of like, oh, that was a bit of a shame, And then Resident Evil 5 was announced, and then we had the 2007, or was it the E3 trailer for 2007, which shows the much bigger public assembly. But that trailer ends with a unique shot of a blonde lady opening her eyes, and everyone was like, sorry, nearly. Everyone was like, oh wow, Sherry's back again. It's amazing. And then, I think there was a leaked photo in Famitsu, which is the one that Chris sees on his PDA at the end of one of the chapters. When he first meets Josh, that image leaked, and I remember there was people image zooming and that, and it was like, oh my god, if you look at it doesn't look like a zip, it looks like a pendant. It's Sherry's back, guys, and it ended up just being the zip on Jill's battlesuit. This is the kind of reaching that the community went to, and then I remember there was another Famitsu issue where we got Allison, who is the blonde girl who gets the Plaga infection. She's briefly in Chris's campaign where she gets pulled back into the house, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, Sherry really is in this! It's going to be absolutely incredible!" And then Umbrella Chronicles. Before that we had Umbrella Chronicles, and there's a secret game mode in that where you play as an unknown character shooting zombies. And if that character gets killed, she makes a very childlike scream, and everybody was like, "It's Sherry again!" And then if you do that special mode, she climbs into a capsule, and it's like, "Oh my god, she's being trained for some sort of experiment." No, that's nonsense. and then Resident Evil 6 comes out, it gets announced, and then some promo comes out, and there's a character with blonde hair, nice looking young lady, and everybody goes, "It's Ashley! Ashley's back!" And it's Sherry, and so they announced that Sherry Birkin will be back in Resident Evil 6. She's going to be an agent working for the same organization as Leon. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh my god, this is like not what people wanted. This just seems absolutely ridiculous. This would be like Newt coming back as a colonial marine. It's like, what are they doing? And then mercifully the game, and I will finish by this, just silence me so much, because she is gifted, in my opinion personally. Resident Evil 6 has got so many flaws, but I'll always support that game for what they do with Sherry. And Sherry gets, in my opinion, hands down the best cutscenes in the game, because hers is the nostalgic link back to the past. By this point, like, Leon's already too far gone down his sort of superhero pathway. Chris is lost in this game, but Sherry is our link to the past, and her writing and her the nostalgic references are all given by Sherry in this game. She's the one that name drops Leon. She's the reason why Chris name drops Claire. She's the connective tissue to the rest of the series, and this is why I go crazy when I talk about Sherry in Resident Evil 6, because I was so blown away by Capcom giving me something I didn't even think I wanted. And it instantly made Sherry one of my favorite characters of the series when I wasn't even really that bothered about her before. And I feel terrible saying that now, but I just think they did a world's worth of work with her in 6. I think she's an incredible character. She is, in my opinion, where the future of the series lies.
Right, exactly. We'll get to that definitely. Can we get a round of applause emojis in the chat, please, for that? That was fantastic. First of all, I was very absent in my fandom around this time, so I don't know what my reaction was to Sherry being announced as part of Resident Evil 6. I can imagine heads rolling, definitely, but I have no idea. I probably just went meh. I didn't play Resident Evil 6 at launch. That's for damn sure. So, Steve, how do you feel about the characterization of Sherry in RE6 after all this time, returning in such a distinctly different role?
Okay, so can I just touch on Revelations 2 for a second?
Sure.
Okay, right, so Claire doesn't feel as Claire as Claire should be in Revelations 2, at least whenever Neil is involved, right? And I feel like Sherry in RE6 is a much better, facsimile. I mean, you can tell it's not 100% Claire, but she's more Claire than Claire is now in the present day. And I 100% think that's the best way for her to be, taking on the action heroic style stuff of Leon in being an agent and doing all these badass things, trying to save the world, but still caring about people and being a bit more of we've got to try and solve this problem. We've got to look after people that Claire has. It's like they're she's blended both of her surrogate parents, as I know they weren't really, but play with me. That kind of identity down, and it works. Like the most human character, and it's a callback to a previous game. That I love it. I actually think she's the only character that returned to RE6 from established games that actually nailed it.
Yes, 100%. I agree with both of you. They got Leon's sort of dutifulness in there. Claire's soft side clearly having a big impact on her, on what was the most important moment of her life in September 98, and it remains with her all that time. And I think personally, pairing her with a character like Jake was kind of a stroke of genius. I don't know if they'd already decided to have a Wesker child in. I'm sure they had, but pairing them with someone else who'd had issues in their life, and having them both go different roads with it. Obviously, Jake's kind of gone down a darker path. He's a mercenary in the middle of a civil war when you meet him. And he just kind of goes through life seemingly without really thinking too much about other people or what's going on around him or his greater impact. Whereas Sherry, and we mentioned this previously, we kind of hinted at it previously, she takes the negative stuff that happened to her and she turns it into something positive, which is, and we're talking about the characters actually doing something, these characters actually get to have an arc in this way. Sherry actually gets to teach Jake a lesson in this way. And Steve, you compared her to Claire, which I think is probably a more apt one. But when I played through it again, I just thought sort of serious shades of Rebecca going on in there in the way that she does that. It's sort of in similar ways that she would do with Billy and something like that. Reach out to sort of a damaged person. But yeah, no, Claire's a good shout as well. It's just a shame that the game's so fast-paced that we don't get to spend more time with her, really. She does get to do all those references. She gets to meet up with Leon briefly and mention Claire. But the game is being a bit more action-focused. I don't feel like we got enough character moments from her. Unfortunately, obviously what we did get, definitely not complaining about. They defined the basis of her character very well. But it's a problem we didn't get to go too much deeper into it, unfortunately, but that's just the case of Resident Evil 6 all around, I think.
Yeah, I really respect the fact that she doesn't take any of Jake's nonsense as well. Like when is it in the opening when he jumps down the chute and she's just like, after you, so sarcastically, and then later on in the locker room scene, she basically just chastises him for just having a bit of a whinge about his parents,
right, exactly,
about Wesker, sorry, and and it's like he doesn't realise that he's talking to a girl who lost her parents at 12 years old. I know Jake, in a sense, didn't have that either, but she's, like you've just elaborated on, she chooses to make her past and twist it into a positive that's defined her now, whereas he seems to kind of resent it, and it's absolutely genius. And one of the things I love as well is something that Batman says, is that this is the new best Wesker and Birkin partnership.
Crazy, isn't it?
Today.
Yeah, definitely. I do like that. Obviously, they have to bring up her past in the game, but it's done so in a masterful way where it just kind of comes up organically. She doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's not the song and dance that Jake has to go through as part of his story. his not knowing who his father was, discovering it, and kind of struggling with that. As I say, there's an actual arc with these two. They spend a lot of that arc stalked yet again by a monster, though. I feel very bad for Sherry. That's 3 monsters now that have chased her down relentlessly, unfortunately. And I do feel like her campaign ends with a bit of a damp squib as well, which it's a bit of a shame. The sort of like quick time event ending boss. But again, just
You mean drinking tea on a plane?
that part's cool.
That's classy. That's classy. That is successful mission with a nice cup of tea. Just go save the world.
It's still in the same outfit as well. I noticed.
Yeah. Okay, not that classy.
So the ending, like what we would call that, the post-credit scene. Yeah, that's nice, but the actual end of the campaign just sort of drops off, and then you get like a terrible pop song over the credits. But again, these are more just RE6 general problems. Like all of my list here of like issues it's just stuff that it comes down. It's just RE6 stuff. And the other one as well, it's worth mentioning, I guess, is the sexualization of her. Just like the scene that you mentioned, Sean, is great as a scene. It's just a shame that they had to have like her running around in a skimpy doctor's, I don't know what you call that, the robe thing where she's been experimented on, but that's, it's not a logical way. It's just done to make her a bit of meat for a little while, which is a real shame. And in Mercenaries, she's got tight and skimpy schoolgirl outfits as well. Gross.
It's the fan service that the series up until that point had been pretty good at avoiding.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's the problem, is that we were not used to seeing it as well, and then you drop it on a character like Sherry, it just makes it way worse.
Resident Evil 6 does have that as an issue, and it's something I hope they don't continue with too much. And I don't think they are with the way that they're like redressing costume, characters nowadays and things like that. So
yeah, it was very strange to look back at it after games that have followed on and haven't followed that trend. It's definitely going to stand out in that way. Unfortunate. But yeah, it doesn't actually impact it all that much, I guess.
I think they even put that in one of the files as well. They I think one of the files in 6 is written by one of a CD technician who wishes he was watching Sherry's cell instead of Jake's.
That's so weird. Fair enough. Yeah,
he makes some sort of comment, I seem to recall, about how he's tired of looking at a half-naked guy. I wish I could trade with the guy doing Sherry's cell or something.
Jeez. So
those were dark times.
Yeah, it is. But look, I mean, let's do what Sherry would do and look at the positives here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's incredible that they pulled this off after so many years, as well as Sean said. It doesn't make sense for her to be in that role if you just say Sherry Birkin, DSO agent. But they put it together really well. They put her character as part of that role as well. And as you alluded to, I really just hope that this isn't it, and this is a future thing moving forward. I mean, I know the answers already, but let's go around the room. Steve, would you like to see Sherry back?
Nah. Yeah, definitely.
And Sean, you already said definitely. Yeah, she's the most wanted for you, I'd say.
Sherry shouldn't just be back; she should be handed the keys to the franchise for now. One of Resident Evil 6's biggest failings is that it was a perfect opportunity to retire our heroes. Not that I necessarily want that to happen, but like it was a perfect opportunity for the likes of Chris to step away now and have his arc completed. And basically give it to these new characters, give it to Sherry, give it to Jake. I don't like the stuff with Jake in terms of the fact that he's a Wesker child. That shouldn't happen. But I like him as a character, and I like his interactions with Sherry, and she really does help define him by the end into the character that he is. So I'd be all up for seeing those two back again, even in terms of a partnership or something. But yeah, I mean, Sherry needs to come back, because I mean, she's wonderful, guys. She's wonderful.
I completely agree. She's my most wanted return, and we touched on that in our comebacks video. We've got some stuff coming out about RE6. I won't spoil too much. There's some videos coming out talking about sort of some things with RE6 with some issues that probably should have been resolved, and you just mentioned one of them, retiring characters. and I want to do one on sort of who should be the flag bearers moving forward, and obviously Sherry's a big part of that. She's my most wanted character for the reasons that you mentioned. She represents this total through line of the entire series history. She's got that. She's a legacy character in the same way that Chris and Jill are, and Leon and Claire. But she represents the future because she started out as this young child who's grown with us as we've played the games, even if there was years and years of absence. Seeing her come back all grown up, fantastic. And we didn't really talk about it too much, but as much as the series has done some seriously sci-fi concepts over the years, cloning and stuff like that, which has turned certain people off. Hello, Sherwin. I actually think that Sherry's infection and her healing is actually really well justified, and it makes her interesting moving forward. It's not too... It is wacky as a concept, but it makes sense when you look at, what the G-Virus actually does. So it'll be interesting to see how they could handle that in future games starring Sherry. So that, for me, makes her the most interesting character for the possible future.
Yeah, I mean, she's the closest character to what you would have as a perfect G human, but she's not immortal as such. Like she does basically allude to the fact that if Jake hadn't have pulled that piece of the propeller out of her, that she would have bled out to death. She would have died from that, but because obviously it's removed, she's able to heal. So that actually gives her an interesting dynamic that you could even work into a gameplay in a future title.
Right. Yeah, it's true. So before we close out, I did ask favourite portrayals. I actually asked our Discord server in a poll which version of Sherry Birkin was everyone's favourite. We got a few votes here and there, but pretty much everybody went Resident Evil 6. So it's fair to say that the vast majority of fans were very happy with how they put Sherry together for this game, and the way that she was portrayed by Eden Riegel as well, or Riegel. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So, Steve, is this your favourite Sherry performance? If not, why not?
No, it is. It's surreal when you think about it that we're all like praising RE6. Because everyone always puts it on a dumpster fire and then throws a match.
Yeah.
She definitely is. And just to echo what STARS Tyrant says, she needs, you can justify her mechanically as a game character with the whole regenerating health. She needs to come back.
Absolutely. And, with her leading up a game as well, they can give her one thing that RE6 didn't have, which, they threw everything else. They threw the kitchen sink at it, but the only thing they didn't have was breathing room for the characters, which is what she would need. So to have her in a less bloated game would be bliss. Stars, this is your favourite Sherry, is it not?
She's not just my favourite Sherry, but she's become one of my favourite characters in the series. So, for all the flaws I can level at Resident Evil 6, I will forever, be endeared to it for giving me the wonderful Sherry Birkin. So, yeah, easily my favourite portrayal.
What a lovely positive note to end on. Well, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors. If you'd like to be part of the show, then please look into auditioning for our file readings. One way to get in touch is to email us at faspraypod@gmail.com. But of course, the best course of action is to join our Discord server, where you can discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's being recorded. The link to the server is in the description of this podcast, and also on our social media profiles. You can find us on Twitter at faspraypod, on Instagram at faspraypod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/faspraypod. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us an iTunes review if you can. It helps spread the word. You can also support the show at patreon.com/faspraypod for as little as $1 a month. Our next episode, can you believe it, will be our review of Resident Evil 3 Remake. We're now a month away from release, and we'll do our best to get our thoughts to you on it as soon as possible. In the meantime, stay up to date with our socials, because Steve and James will be doing a midnight stream of the game, just like they did with Remake 2, so that's very exciting indeed. And as I said at the top of the show, we have plenty more to tide you over before the game releases as well. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of us individually. I'm at Cyniac_123, Steve is at Firebutton Games, and Sean is at STARS_Tyrant. And finally, thank you for listening, and have a good week. not to also feel like I'm bagging on Remake 2, but I forgot what I was going to say. Damn. Edit that bit out.
Magnifying glass, Si. Magnifying glass.
Well, this. What the hell was it? It's gone now. It was there and then it was gone. Flip.
That's an outtake, everybody.
Yeah, it's welcome to the outtakes. My brain just went.
Size breaking down.
Right, I'm gone. I've lost it. What were we talking? Remake 2. Something about it. I don't know. Never mind. Right, let's find a jumping on point. It's gone. It's gone forever. I'll remember it tomorrow and I'll shout it in the street or something stupid.